Chris, you want to start?
Absolutely. Fantastic.
Okay.
My name is Chris Pitt. I am Group Impact Director at the Benefact Group, and I'm here just to say hello and to welcome you and to introduce the real expert that you are here to hear from, which is Layla from the Directorate of Social Change. So I'll leave her to introduce herself in a minute. But I just wanted to say a little bit about Benefact Group and then a little bit about our funding, which you hopefully might be interested in. So on the next slide, there's just a little bit about Benefact Group. We are a family of financial services businesses. We are investment management, we are specialist insurance, and we are insurance broking and advisory services. Though all those businesses are wrapped up in the Benefact Group, and we are quite different in that we are owned by a charitable trust, the Benefact Trust. So that means the more profitable and successful our group is, the more money goes to good causes to our charitable trust and then goes out to benefit society. So we're very proud of being a quite different business in that the benefit of our success is society's success. And therefore, we've got some big charitable giving programs, which we're really kind of pleased and proud of. One on the next slide I was just going to highlight to you, which you might be interested in. This is called the Movement for Good program. It is a funding program that basically we want it all with. We want to reach hundreds and hundreds of charities. We want to give small donations absolutely everywhere. But we also want to give some larger grants to some charities really close to our customers and communities as well. So we launched it a few years ago. It gives £1,000 donations to absolutely any charity doing anything. I hope many of you on the call have received donations from us. And if you haven't, you should apply now. Well, not now, listen to this webinar first and do it afterwards. But you can apply any time for £1,000 donations. And we want to give you one. We want to give as many charities as possible with this funding. And then we also want to reach some charities with some larger donations. So, and we're in the midst of that application process as well. So this webinar, I guess, is quite timely in helping you maybe thinking about whether that application process is right for you as well. And then finally, on this slide here, we just highlight the fact that we are keen to do more of what we're doing today, which is offer you charities more support with fundraising. We recognise that we're a very special and different business. We've achieved giving £100 million to good causes, and we're going to set ourselves even bigger ambitions. But that will never be enough. Charities will always need more, and there will always be more calls, more need for funding. So we're launching more fundraising resources to enable you, to enable charities to raise even more. Hence this webinar today, one example of it, and hence a huge range of fundraising resources that we've got on our Benefact Group website. So really encourage you to have a look at that and see how we might better help you raise more. I'm going to pass over to Layla in just a second. Before I do that, just some kind of housekeeping, the other important job that I've got to do. So today's sessions will be about an hour long. There will be some time for kind of comments and questions and discussion. We hope and we expect that there's always some quick questions to kind of address throughout and at the end of the session. So I'm sure we might run up to the time. I think as we've just found out, please don't use the chat function because that doesn't seem like it's working, but use the Q&A at any time to kind of pose any questions, any comments throughout the session. We're delighted that there are so many charities on the call today, hundreds, which is absolutely brilliant, but it does make it a little bit difficult to interact. So if you use that Q&A, we can pick up comments and questions and introduce them. As you might have seen, the webinar has been recorded. So don't worry if you miss anything, you can go back and you can watch this again and we'll make it available. So without further ado, thank you for listening to me briefly and over to Layla.
Hi everybody. If you are able to put yourselves on mute, because I can't seem to find how to do that with this webinar, it's kind of thrown me a little bit. That'd be really helpful if you can put yourselves on mute. And thank you for joining today. We will try, because obviously online is quite intense. So, and what I want to say is that as there's a huge number of you, obviously I'm not going to be doing breakout rooms, and it's only so much interactive work I'm able to do. And I also want to tell you that the slides you will get in due course. There's a lot on them, but I won't be going through all of it. I will be selecting the main bits for the session. And then the good thing is you will then take away those slides with you afterwards and you have a chance to go through them, because hopefully it'll be more in context. Obviously the chat function is disabled, so if you're able to put stuff in the Q&A, I will do my best to keep looking at it. If I miss anything, hopefully if anything major comes up, Chris will hopefully help me as well. The first thing I'd like to do before I start really is, if you can put in the Q&A, if you can think, if you were a funder yourself, so if you had held the purse strings and you were giving out money, just think of one thing, because obviously there's so many things, but think of the one thing that's really important to you. If you were giving out money, what one thing would you be looking for in a proposal, the most important thing to you? So if you can just take a minute and put that in the chat. So think of one thing only that's really important to you, that if you were a funder, you'd be looking for in a proposal. So we can have a look. You can put it in the, okay. Let me have a look. So we've got who would benefit, right, I'm just trying to, so many bits, okay. Let's have a look. Right. I'll try and read as many as I can. The benefit to people, integrity of the team delivering the project, making impact, impacts come up a lot, meeting the funders' objectives, emotional engagement, how the money will make a difference, outcomes, has it been spent on the purpose I've agreed, impact has come up a lot, integrity has come up a lot, will it directly support the beneficiaries, evidence of impact, sustainability, charity status, clear purpose that makes a meaningful difference, clear explanation of how the money would be spent and the benefits this would bring, clarity has come up a lot, impacts come up constantly, community, who benefits and how, what else we've got, results, outcomes, credibility, good financial management, again we've had evidence of need, sustainability, who's going to be involved. We've had a lot on impact here, which is quite interesting. What else? Communities come up a lot, meeting goals, best use of funds, safeguarding, helping those in need. Okay, we've got a lot there, which is really interesting. And it's really interesting that a lot of you have said impact. And I think really think about what that word means to you. What does the word impact actually mean to you? Is it impact that's going to be a predicted impact? Or are you looking for the impact that's previously been made and you want it to be repeated? So really think about when I say impact, because it's just a word, but actually when you break it down, what does it actually really mean? What is it that you're looking for within that word? Chris, are you able to interject just briefly into anything that you want to say in regards to that?
Yeah, well, I think as a corporate funder and knowing our trust, the thing that I'd probably flag is shared interests, which I think is a very, very interesting thing. And I completely recognise and sympathise with the challenge that charities have with approaching funders. I think funders have got to flip their perspective a little bit and understand it from a charity's perspective, because I think they are a bit narrow in their view of this is what we're after and we're interested in, therefore charities should respond to it, not necessarily realising that there are an awful lot of funders that charities are having to think about. So it's a real challenge for you. But I do think if both parties are thinking about those shared interests, because and that's what's in it for us. What are we looking to achieve, and what can a charity help us achieve? I think that is the sweet spot, and I think that not only secures funding but secures longer term partnership as well.
Thank you very much. I think that's a really good way of looking at it. I think the first thing you want to do when you're raising funds, before you even go into anything, is not just think about yourselves, think about what the funder would want as well. And we're not just talking about sponsorship, we're talking about mainly trusts and foundations, but also they have a need, they have objectives, and really understanding that and thinking, well, if I think impact's important to me, have I actually mentioned that, or have I alluded to that at all in my proposal? Because if I haven't and I think it's important, then clearly I've got a lot of work to do myself. So some of the big questions you really need to start to think about is actually, are you ready to write a proposal? It's so easy to go out there and just write proposals, not really do your research effectively, because none of us have capacity or time, and that's a given. I mean, I've got 25 years fundraising experience, and even though I deliver training, I also work part-time leading on funding and marketing for a small community centre, and I've worked for large and small charities, so I totally still get all the challenges that we face, and I'm under pressure as well, same as everyone else. So it's understanding what you need to prepare for you to be ready. But if you don't know what you need to prepare, then how will you do it? And what do you want? Why do you want it? Why? I mean, the why reports have become really kind of fashionable these days. Why do you want to do what you want to do? And what we tend to do these days is squeeze ourselves in kind of different categories or different funder objectives, because there's pots of funding in different places. But do you even need that funding? The whole point is that we really want to get out there, not just look for projects, but look for core funding so we can carry on and continue with the work we do. So it's looking at what we need to prepare, and again thinking, if you were a funder, what would you be looking for? So start to change your mindset a bit. Look, already we've got 341 of you here, potentially here, unless you're from the same organisation. Some of you you've got 341 different organisations, and you're all valid, you're all important, and you're all doing great work. But how can you stand out? How can you manage that competition? How can you attract that attention for someone to look at you over anyone else? How can your cover letter be the most interesting one over your CV? It's about making your cause not only transparent, but relatable. Because even if you think, well, no one can get my cause, well, how can you make it relatable? How can it be something that if I knew nothing about it, I'm able to still relate to it on some level? And the whole thing about thinking outside the box, it might sound like a cliche, but quite often it's take a step back and look at what you've actually got already. What have you got already? What are you not using? Really making the funders visualize what it is that you're doing, make them picture it, take them on that journey with you. So that's the mindset you want to be coming from. You want to be coming from a mindset of, if you were reading something, what would attract you? So that's when you kind of take yourself away from the whole cutting and pasting job, because ultimately you want it to be your writing, your story. And again, what is your story? So again, I'm going to ask you to put in in the Q&A, and I'm going to try and get as many as I can. I just want you to think that you're in a coffee shop and you walk in, you sit down, you're at a table by yourself. Chris walks in and he's like, "Hi, how are you?" And then he says, "Right, okay, I'm just going for random here. Hazel or Emma or Louisa or Oki, tell me what you do." So, and I want you to think about what's the most important thing in a sentence that you would sum up as to what you do, not what your job is, but what your organisation does. So if you can just start putting that in the chat. Literally, you're sitting in a coffee shop, Chris doesn't know you from Adam, but he asks you, what does your organisation do? What would you say? So think about that literally in one small sentence. I'd be interested to see what you would say. So I'm going to start looking at these Q&As. So if you can start doing that. Just in one sentence, okay. The thing with this Q&A chat box, it keeps jumping up and down. Small grassroots owl trust, barn owl trust, small grassroots charity working tirelessly to protect and conserve barn owls and the environment throughout the UK, preserving past for the future. Yes, Sarah Edwards, the slides will be circulated afterwards for sure, don't worry. Let me see. Opening our church to the community, providing young people with skills for life, improving biodiversity for all, looking after mentally disabled adults. We empower learning disabled adults to find their confidence, creative expression, self-advocacy through theatre and performance. Thank you. Okay. Fights for racial equality for diverse minority communities. So many here. Supports grandparents permanently caring for their grandchildren. Feed people who can't access food banks. Safe and welcoming place for communities to come to. Help poor people in rural Tanzania to help themselves by injecting capital into small development projects. Making our church community facility. Transform the lives of disadvantaged communities and individuals. Spot Island's only dedicated paediatric hospital to help sick children and families. Support DDL charitable work in different parts of the world, especially in Africa. Okay. There's a lot here. Now, the reason why I got you to do that is note down what you wrote, because clearly what you've said imaginary to Chris is what you felt was really important in the first instance. That's a really good starting point. And the reason why I say that is because quite often a lot of the trusts and foundations or corporate foundations initially want a one-pager or a two-pager. That's when you think, where do I start? Oh my God, I've got so much to say. Yes, you will have so much to say, but in that one or two pager, you don't need to say it all. You need to say what you think is initially important, and the detail and the methodology of that will come if you get to the second round. So really try and think, if I've only got to do a one or two pager and keep it simple, what's the most important thing that I've said? Right, this is what I think is important. That's the bit I'm going to start with, and I'm going to start to really build and pad that out. So that's a really good way of starting to think about things. There's so many of you that have said things here that I'm going to read a couple more. We are the City Church, the heart of Milton Keynes, the new city. Ours is a humanical and diverse congregation. We protect our oceans now for future generations. So many different causes. And I think Chris would probably agree as well. If he's sitting here having to choose, my God, they're also worthy and also different. But you want to...
Yeah, well, I think my coffee's gone cold. My coffee's gone cold waiting for it, but for a very, very good reason, because these are all fantastic pictures.
Yeah, so you can see there's so many different causes, and you need to take us on a journey. Basically, we need to be able to visualize it and picture it. And one thing I would say is, and I'm being a bit harsh, but I think it's important to say, is when you are talking to somebody or writing to somebody, don't use abbreviations straight away, because it might be something that you know because you've been working through it and you think everybody should know. No, not everybody's going to know. So if you're using abbreviations, whether it's health-based or community-based or whatever, and you think, well, I should know what that stands for, I won't, or I may not. So initially spell it out, because if I don't know what that stands for, that won't make me picture it as effectively as someone else who's explained themselves at least once. So bear that in mind. So also bear in mind, you're going to have different audiences. And the reason why I'm starting like this is because you've got to have that mindset when you're writing proposals. You have different audiences. You might have sponsors or corporates. In this case, you've got a corporate foundation. You've got your beneficiaries, and they're the people who actually benefit from your services, and you don't go to them for money. They are benefiting from your services. You've got supporters, and they can come in so many different facets. There could be people that you tender to. There could be people who support what you do but don't necessarily give you money but actually believe in what you do. You've got trusts and foundations. You've got major donors, people that attend your events. You've got your local community, government funding, trustees. So they come in different guises. And a lot of you initially, when I said what would a funder be looking for, you used the word community, supporting community. And some of you might think, well, I don't have a community. And I want you to really understand the word community will come up a lot, as particularly in lottery, trusts and foundations, but we're not always talking about your local community. We're not always talking about, if you're working in a hospice, for example, your local community or the people that live around you. Your community are the people that benefit from what you do. So if you work for schools, your community are school children and teachers. You know, so, you know, if you work for, I'm trying to think, parents, your community of parents. So it's not always a geographical based community. So I want you to understand that and not feel confused by it. And the other thing is, and Chris will hopefully agree on some of this, is engaging with your funders. It's understanding them, which Chris said, it's what do they want? What is a funder looking to do? And how can you as a charity also help make that happen? Also tick that box for them. And when you're doing your research, it's really understanding that from their perspective and showing that respect, that you've really looked at it and understood it, and you've found that mutually beneficial synergy that works for the both of you. And this is not just about corporates or sponsorships or anything like that. It's about you understanding that a foundation, a trust and foundation, a corporate foundation also has objectives. They also have things they believe in. They also have goals that they want to reach. And is what you do helping them reach that goal as well? And also finding ways that your leadership, because one of you mentioned leadership of organisation in the Q&A box. How can you get your leadership to communicate with the funders? How can it be on top of your website and social media? Because again, people will start to look at that and just want to see, well, what are you about? How many followers do you have? What kind of people are responding to you? What kind of posts you're putting up? Because the world has really, really changed. Highlight a USP or unique selling point. You know, using the word we are unique, but actually without explaining what that is. We're all unique, but there could be two of you in the same area doing exactly the same thing. What makes you different from the other? What makes you stand out? And you don't have to have any unique qualities, but you may have to have but you might have something that actually someone else doesn't have. And it's not about you necessarily highlighting someone else hasn't got that. It's about you highlighting what you do have that's different. And being up to date with your content delivery, being up to date and moving with the times, and thinking about, are our services moving with the times, you know, post-COVID, etc. Are we just stagnant? And then start to look at external factors, really understand that, because if you don't understand what's having an impact on you as an organisation, then that has an impact on your proposals, because if a funder's looking at it, they're going to think, well, clearly they've not understood or shown how they've been impacted. For example, a lot of funders wanted to know how you've been impacted by COVID. And if you're not aware of that, or don't know it, or don't even allude to it, that's almost a cut and paste from an old proposal. So again, think about that and think about, right, what kind of funders am I looking to work with? What's going to work for us as an organisation right now? Might not be ready for sponsorship, might not be ready for events, but we're ready for foundations, corporate foundations, we're ready for trust and foundations. How are we going to cultivate them? Who are we going to go to? So start thinking on those levels before you even write a proposal. And I say that because it's very, very important before you just jump ahead. If you were a funder, again, we've looked at some of this. Impact came up, sustainability came up, outcome came up, reputation, evidence of success, when you're looking at, so for example, if you're looking at Movement for Good and you look at their criteria, have a look at some of the key words. So some trusts and foundations might say, for example, we're looking to support a project that's transformational. Think, oh, okay, how can I allude to that in my proposal? How can I complement that word? How can I mirror it? And understand things like what's an output, what's an outcome. An output is literally what you're putting out there. So for you to reach your goal, your methodology is providing 10 sessions of counselling for young people aged 10 to 12, for example. That's what you're putting out there. That's your output. Well, okay, but what's the point of that? What's the outcome? Well, the outcome is that counselling enables them to rebuild their confidence, increase their self-esteem. Okay, great. And therefore, what's the impact? The impact down the line is it might enable them to get better jobs, do better education, have better relationships. So impact is that bigger goal. So output is what you're putting out there. Outcome is what's happening as a result of what you're putting out there, the immediate aftermath. And impact is that really big thing that's going to happen down the line, the impact it's going to have on your beneficiaries. Okay, if anybody's got any questions, I'm trying to look to see if there's any questions. At the moment, I can't see that. So
while you do that, Layla, I could just make a comment that I think
yes,
I think there's a real balance of head and heart in how you pitch what you do, and understandably, we've asked you to almost pitch what you do in that Q&A. But there is a real focus on impact, but also why you do what you do. I think is really important as well, and it depends on the audience and the opportunity, and you might make that pitch slightly differently. But why you do what you do, why you're passionate about it, why you believe in it, and why you personally believe in it as fundraisers. Because I think if you don't, I'm always a bit of a passionate fan of, like, if you don't really believe in what you're doing, it kind of shows. So why you're passionate about your part in that organisation is quite important as well. And we hope to achieve both with our funding. There's a lot of heart in our small donations. We just want to give to charities that are great, doing every possible thing. But there's some head as well. So our larger grants are much more focused on charities that are doing work really close to our customers. So heritage, historic buildings, education, increasingly kind of climate and environment. How funding charities in that space is going to help achieve our objectives and aims, which are very legitimate ones in trying to solve the problems of society through what we do as a business. So there is a balance, I think, of head and heart.
brilliant. Thank you so much. It's really useful to hear it from a funder's perspective as well. So do really try to think about those things. Again, I'm going to briefly go over this before we go on to it. Again, avoid jargon. Okay, understand your funder, which is what Chris has said. It's finding that balance. Again, the language, it depends on who you're going to. Some like punchy, some like lengthy. If you're going to put in images, make sure they're necessary and relevant, not just plonked for the sake of it. Make the reader, Chris talked about how important it is to feel that passion. Make them visualize it, because especially if it's a cause that isn't as relatable, but you want to make it relatable, you want to take me as a funder on a journey. If you are putting some statistics, put the references in the footnotes, because it's important that we know you've got them from somewhere, and obviously the name of the contact. So these are some of the basics. So it's that internal preparation to think about, is having your information in the first place and having your budget, because they do look at budgets and they want to make sure. Funders will be really honest with you. They will say, I can see that you've just tried to fit it in, because we give 10k away. You've just tried to make up a budget for 10k just to fit it in. No, if it's not 10k, if it's 8k, ask for 8k. Don't ask for 10k for the sake of it, because they can see it. Obviously, you're going to factor in core cost recovery, which I'll briefly talk about, but don't just put in something for the sake of putting in. Plan your approach, look at your audience, and if you are going to ask for an amount, do research. What's the foundation offering to give? What have they given to before to similar organisations? So really use your judgment on this. And if you're filling in an application form, that's quite different because they're much more directed by questions and word count than it is about you writing your own narrative. And also, monitoring and evaluation. Allude to that, because I'm going to want to know, if I'm giving you money, how am I going to make sure that you've evaluated that what's happened is what the money that I've given you has actually really made a difference. So this is kind of part of your prep work. And then you look at the what is the problem or need that needs to be met. A lot of you have alluded to it, and you've said what it is that you do. Build on it. First of all, what's that need? There's obviously a problem, an issue, something that has been identified by your charity. What is that? Because I need to be able to, put it in context. So I've got 2 children. So my eldest one, when he's writing essays, I say to him, if you just start from the middle, but don't take me on a journey, I'm going to get all confused. Have your introduction, then your nice middle section, then your conclusion. I want to be able to understand what's the actual problem here. What is it? What's for me to kind of go, oh my God, I didn't realize this was happening, or I didn't realize that actually it's so difficult I didn't realize that in the borough of, say, Hackney, we've got so many children who are carers looking after their parents, or I didn't realize that has an impact. It means they miss a lot of schooling, or I'm just making this up, but I'm just, it just means you start with making me kind of picture the actual scenario. And then you kind of telling me, well, and these are the gaps. This is what's happening. And actually, there isn't any provision for them currently, but we are here to fill in the gaps. And this is what Chris said. It's why do you do what you do? And why do you do it? So, and then it's how you intend to fill the gap, right? This is the gap we've identified, and this is what we intend to do. This is how we intend to do it. And that clarity, people always think core, oh my God, no one's going to give to core. Well, what is core? Core is not just the boring old rent and accountancy costs or printing costs. Core is the backbone of what you do. And you might have some ongoing work that you do, and some projects come and go on the side, but some of you will have ongoing stuff, and that is the core, the heart of what you do. So it's thinking about that. And does it meet with the aims and objectives of your organisation? And methodology, what are you going to be doing? So if you've got a 1 or 2 pager, you don't need detail. You're just kind of saying how you intend to fill that gap. If you then have to write a longer proposal, then you go into detail about the methodology, how you're going to be doing this, okay? Is it through research? Is it through services? How are you doing what you're doing, and why did you choose that particular route? And you should all have access to your strategy. Have a read of it. Does what it is you want to do, does it meet with your strategic objectives? And if so, can you allude to it on some level in your proposal? And have you had any achievements so far that you think will be relevant for you to say? So again, start to really think about all this stuff. And areas of assessment that you really want to think about are your resources, because a funder would like to know, well, they're asking for this, but actually, have they asked for the right resources? Do they have the right resources currently to even deliver this? What outcomes and impacts are they looking to achieve? I want to understand. I want to know they've really thought about it. If I give them money and down the line, how am I going to know this is going to continue? That goes back to sustainability, and a lot of you mentioned that earlier. You can all use the word "we're innovative," but what does it actually mean? How are you innovative? Back it up with evidence. Community, what's your community? Again, it doesn't have to be geographical community. Who are you reaching directly? I used to work for an organisation called Parenting UK, which is now Family Lives, and we indirectly reach parents. We directly reach parenting practitioners, but it's kind of saying yes, but down the line, these practitioners are directly reaching this number of parents, and what we're helping these parenting practitioners with will have a very positive outcome on the parents. So make them see the chain. What are your targets? Why do you have these particular targets for your particular project, for example? And if you're saying it's transformational and that your funding will be transformational to fund it, how? How am I going to know that the money I'm going to give you is going to make it be transformational? You saying it isn't enough. In what capacity? And again, evidence about how you're going to monitor and evaluate. So these are things that you want to think about when you're writing a proposal, because there are areas that you will start to get assessed on. And having looked at movement for goods previous, last year when I did deliver this session as well, certainly impact, sustainability, all these things are really, really important. So we've done that. Now, ask yourself, can I answer any of these right now? Because if you can't, you're not quite ready. What are the expected outcomes and achievements of your particular project? And when I say expected outcomes, because if it's a new project, it's not happened yet, but this is what you're expecting. Do you have a clear budget? Core cost recovery. Now, that is when, say, your general expenses, your core expenses, let's say they're 100,000 a year, but your project, which is completely separate, costs £10,000. You don't just ask for £10,000. You need to take a certain percentage of your overall core expenditure to add to this £10,000. Otherwise, you're just making enough money to meet your projects, but what's happening to the backbone of the organisation? You've got to make sure that you factor in a certain element of core. So obviously, for £10,000, you can't ask for 100. You might be able to ask for 1,000 or £1,500, which would match what you're asking for your project, which would be, well, actually, there's elements of core that come into it that will support this project as well. Do you know how you're going to be sustainable? Or at least you have plans in place. It could be that you say we're going to continue raising money from funders, and we've got a fundraiser in place, or we've got good relationships, but anything to show that you've thought about the future. A lot of funders want to know, have you applied to anyone else? Do you have any other prospects? Again, based on confidentiality, you think, well, what can I allude to here? They want to know how much you've committed to the project already, and think about your start and finish date. That's really, really important, because if you're going to say my project starts in August and you're only applying in July, that's no good. It's very, very unlikely the fund is going to take a month to get back to you. You're looking at 4 months, sometimes longer, unless you're very lucky that you meet the deadline of a trustees meeting and they happen to decide there and then. But generally, you want to show that you're pre-planning. When do you need the money for? So thinking about when they're going to get back to you. So this is why when you're writing a proposal, go back to basics. Don't be overwhelmed. Oh my God, where do I start? Where do I start? Think about your audience and think about what's going to motivate them, which is what Chris was saying as well. I've given you the basic question vocabs because they're always the best thing to start with. And then you start to build a skeleton of your organisation. I'm really sorry, they're doing building works outside and even the windows are closed, the noise is still coming in. Who are you? Who are you? It's quite simple, okay? You don't have to put fancy titles right now. Just think about, I'm going to start drafting, brain dumping my proposal. I'm going to try and do it in some kind of an order. Let me just dump all the basics down and then I can work on editing it. Who are you as an organisation? What do you do? Okay, so initially I just want to know that straight off, right? And then I want to, okay, this is what we do. Well, who do you do it for? Why do you do it? And the why is very powerful. Okay. How then? Okay, fine. Okay, then how do you do it? How often? When? If it's relevant. Where? And how do you know it works? If you've done it in the past, what evidence do you have that it works? So start by really just putting little things down here for yourselves. Really think about it, and then you have the opportunity to start padding it out and giving yourself fancier titles if you wanted to. Because having that knowledge about your organisation gives you that confidence. And the analogy I always use is understand where you are behind the scenes. If you've been given a script for a theatre show, or you've been, and you don't know your character, you haven't done research, you go on stage in front of the audience, you don't know your lines, you've not really invested in your character, the audience can tell. Whereas if you go and really give your character history, understand it, you come on stage, you become that character, the audience buys into it. So it's the same concept. What's your vision and mission? Understand that. Is there a strategy in the organisation? Have you looked at it? What's your fundraising strategy? Where do you want to go as an organisation? Therefore, how can you allude to that, like I said, in your proposal, that this is actually meeting your strategic objectives? What are those objectives? Now, it can't be fluffy. It's got to be, SMART stands for, it's got to be specific. So let's have a look here, for example. Okay, someone said, Richard Watson, he said, we serve our community in so many ways, physically, socially, mentally, and spiritually. Okay, then you can narrow it down and go, right, I want to be a bit more specific here for my particular proposal. Because then as a funder, I want to be able to picture, I need it to be tangible. It's got to be measurable. So it could be that you might want to say, we're hoping to help an extra 1,000 people a year, for example. That, how that gives me an indication that you're able to measure this because you're looking for an increase in numbers. It's got to be attainable, not a pie in the sky. If you're tiny, you're asking for £1 million, but actually, do you have the resources and something that you're able to do? Do you think you're going to get that? It's got to be realistic and relevant. It's going to be realistic because if you're tiny, you have to think about, well, how much am I asking for? Why am I asking for it? And actually, is that the right synergy for me and a foundation? Because they're not going to give me £1 million when I'm only small and have a staff of 2, for example. And again, is it relevant? Why am I going for this money? Am I going for it because it's there? Or am I going for it because it's actually relevant to our strategy? And time bound, like I said, is there a time factored in this or not? So make sure your objectives are SMART. So when I'm reading as a funder, I'm very clear. Positioning, again, where are you positioned? If you are a national charity, then and you've got lots of different branches, then the chances are it kind of makes sense for you to ask for a larger amount because you have the resources, you have, but if you're local, but you're the only one in your local area that does what you do, you could be equally as strong. So again, it's where you're positioned. Really work out with your competitors, with people who do similar things to what you're doing, or equally with people who don't do what you're doing, but are in the local area and have an equally strong cause, which could kind of give them the edge over you. So understand where you are. Ethics and values is really, really important, because if you don't know what they are, then you have the opportunity to say no to certain funders because it doesn't meet with your ethics and values, and that's very important. The funders respect that. And again, understand your audience. Who are you writing to? With that prep work, again, I'm going to skim through this. Do an audit. Look at your past proposals, if you have any. What's worked? What hasn't worked? Has anybody given you feedback? Have they not given you feedback? What's the pattern? How much have they given you? What have they given towards? Is it been multi-year? Has it been single year? What's the feedback been? Have you had to change anything? How many second rounds have you not got to, but you've the first round's been okay? Really think about those things. Start to look at a pattern. Always start with who you've already got and what you already know, especially when you're under-resourced. SWOT and a pestle. That I ask you to do if you can in your own time. Right now, if you were to write a proposal, what's the strength? What's on your side? What's the weakness that you might want to change and put it into a strength box? What are the opportunities that you're not tapping into, and what the threats or the barriers are getting in your way? Because if you don't know that, it's going to be difficult for you to be effective in your research for a funder as well. And pestle is, look what's happening outside. What's happening politically and economically and socially that could have an impact? What's happening in the world of technology that maybe you don't have that could have an impact? What's happening legally or environmentally? So think about it. For example, last year during COVID, obviously that had a massive impact. So therefore, a lot of other charities lost out, but charities that were doing work that had an impact on on say young people who are missing out on services or mental health. I mean, all that shot up. That became important. That became a priority. Emergency COVID funding became a priority. Black Lives Matter became a priority. So really think about, where do I fit in right now? What's my case for support? How can I make them want to support me? What case can I put forward? And that will then help you with you kind of take it to the next level. And again, your audience, remember, your supporters and beneficiaries are different. So we've gone over that. So again, you want to be able to shift your weaknesses into strengths box, or if something is a classic weakness that you cannot change or is a risk, at least you know it. You go, I know it, I can't change it, but I know it. So I'm going to do my best to be aware of it and to stay aware of it. So you want to make it compelling. So we've talked about it, the need, okay? This is like, you know, you're brain dumping. What's the vision, mission and values? You don't need to go into it in detail in your proposal. That can be done in one line, but again, it's the need. I need to understand why it is you think it's important. Your plans for the future are important. Look at the services you're offering. And this is where you start and write it down, almost put all your services on a piece of paper and draw it all out. So for example, it could be counselling, it could be training, it could be, you know, so you write all that down, but then don't underestimate what else can come out of that. Because you're doing counselling, but then as a result of counselling, it's helping their self-esteem, it's helping their self-confidence. Then you've got training, for example, it's helping hard to reach people integrate within the community, it's upskilling them. Write all that down, because then you find you've got more categories open up to you which funders like, because you might not have realized that actually you're delivering training and then, oh, there's not many trusts that support training, but actually what's that training doing? That training is upskilling, is providing them employment opportunities. Okay, there might be trusts and foundations or that give to that. So really draw out your benefits so you can understand what you've got there, what's unique about you. So really think about that. Do you use volunteers, for example? That's really important as well. So again, the leadership of your organization, you might want to write a line about that. And people might wonder, well, who is leading this organization? Do I feel, you know, they're right? You know, for example, it could be that an organization that works to support mental health, you might have some trustees that have experienced that themselves or have an understanding. So it's just to let the funder grasp and understand you as an organization. And again, anyone else doing what you're doing, you know, and if so, how do you stand out? Okay. How many people do you directly help? Do you have any statistics? And the powerful thing is, if you did not exist, what would happen? Really think about that. What would happen if you weren't there in your particular area for even, okay? If you're not there to fill that gap. So there are all the things you really want to kind of build in your proposal and think about it. When you're looking at your budget as well, again, like I said, are you going for core or are you going for capital? Capital does not necessarily mean rebuilding. It could be refurbishment, it could be painting, decorating, or you're going for a project. And if you're going for a project, then it's really important that you have some core cost recovery in it as well. If you're going for multi-year, think of depreciation, inflation, and really package it effectively. These are the very boring overhead costs, okay? But it's about being clever. And I'm saying this, Chris, I'll be very transparent about this. It's about being clever. And because every funder knows that you've got all this to pay, probably rent less so for a lot of places because a lot of people are working from home, but everybody knows you've got all this to do, but it's boring to look at. So how can you turn it into interesting? You might have a community centre. It's not just about rent for that. What's happening in that space? Bring it to life. Yes, some people specifically want to know about salary, but actually what does that salary do? What's the outcome of that salary? I don't want to give to marketing. Well, it's not about marketing. It's your messaging. What's the impact? So it's turning the boring into interesting and actually making people understand, because it's a no-brainer. Yes, you've got building, you've got to pay the rent for it. But what's happening in that space? So really think about what you're writing. Length is led by the funder. You'll know. They will give you enough indication. And I've put this in capitals because you don't need to include everything. It does need to be tailored. They might not want to know everything at the beginning, and actually mixed messages, it's not as effective. Think about your main message, the main thing you want to say. And like I said at the beginning, if you were in a coffee shop chatting to Chris and you said one thing, that's clearly the most important thing to you. How can you build on that? If you're writing a 10-pager, an executive summary is needed because it gives a chance for the funder to get a sense of what's coming up. But you can't write that until you write the whole thing anyway. And if you've got a smaller bid to do, then an intro is fine. So you've got your intro, and then you've got key information in the body, and then you've got a punchy conclusion. Strong conclusion, strong ending, but assume the reader has no knowledge. If they've supported you continuously, it still might be someone else who reads it who isn't familiar. There might be a new employee. You can allude to it, say, as you already will know, then that's saying that I know you've got a relationship with you. I'm not kind of ignoring that. So again, think of your language. But assume you've got no knowledge, so don't keep abbreviating things, because I need to be able to picture it. I need to be able to understand your story. So your outline, okay, intro, show me the need, maybe picture it. Let me kind of immerse myself in the actual issue and the problem, and kind of let me process that in the first place, and then let me kind of work out the gap that you've identified and kind of think, okay, I can see why they've identified this gap, and let me then process what is it you're choosing to do about it, how, but then most importantly, let me try and process why you think you're the right one for it. What is it that you've got is right? Is it a particular skill set you've got? What is it that you feel you are the right people for the job? I want to know what impact you might have made so far. And if there are any statistics, I want to know they're not from 2010 or 2009, they're actually a bit more up to date than that. It's your goal as well. If I'm giving you money, what's happening with that? Sometimes when you're writing a core proposal, another way of looking at it is you can say £5,000 will do the following. And this is not restricting it to do the following, but it's giving someone a sense that their money is not going in a black hole, that their money actually in these particular sums can be spent on lots of different things. Make them relate to it. Make them kind of see what you're aiming at, what your intended outcomes are. If you want to have an appendices, or if you want a case study that you think works really well within the proposal, by all means put it in, because sometimes a case study can do a lot more than just narrative. If you've got testimonials that you want to add to either in the appendices or within the proposal, if you think they're strong, then put them in. So areas of assessment, which we've looked at, and this has also come from Movement for Good in the past, impact and effectiveness. Can you demonstrate real impact? Can you understand? So I want to be able to know your reach and the influence you're going to have. Is it going to make a lasting difference? If you're innovative, how are you doing it differently to tackle the certain social issues? Are you taking a new perspective on it? Are you establishing new partnerships? What approaches are you taking that are quite different that actually you think are going to work? Care and compassion, and the passion, which Chris said as well. It's really important to be able to see that. So I'm going to end on the kind of passionate side of it. And Chris, is there anything you want to say at this point? And then we're going to have a look and see if there's any questions that anybody's got that they want to say. But I don't want to go into it too much because obviously it's quite a lot intense online. but you will have these slides, you'll be able to absorb it a bit more. But please, by all means, if you've got any questions, do ask. And Chris, is there anything you want to say at this point?
Yeah, well, thank you for all of that download. And I hope this gives everyone a bit of time, I guess, to kind of reflect and to step outside of your day job of doing this day to day, to kind of reflect on what you're doing and how you're doing it and trying to strengthen your approach. So I think there's a huge amount of great advice in there. From a funder's perspective, I guess one thing I would say is, which not all funders might admit, that we're not the expert, you are. I think funders have the responsibility to have the kind of ambition and the focus on social good, social impact. What do we want to achieve? What are the big issues we want to address? But you as charities, the detail of the issues, exactly where they're happening and how, and how to tackle them. So there's a real kind of knowledge there that you've got, which in the right way you can really inform funders about. So if you want to achieve this ambition, well, this is how you're going to have to do it, or this is how we can help you do it. So I wouldn't underestimate that kind of knowledge and expertise that you have, that funders don't, because they can't possibly be everywhere doing the work you do. And the conversation about core funding is very, very interesting, and we've experienced it a bit with our funding, which is more flexible. And again, I'm not a funding expert, but I would wholeheartedly agree that I can't see that any reasonable kind of funding application can't consider or include, how have we got to cover the costs of running this organisation as well. And I guess funders want to know that their money is going to well-run charities. So there's no kind of embarrassment in saying, well, this is part of running our charity well, which is part of delivering this project and this outcome. So it's reasonable that this is part of what we were pitched for. And I did see on a webinar recently, I had some really interesting feedback from a charity that was being very explicit about wellbeing support costs for its employees as part of core funding, which I thought was very brave, but absolutely, completely makes sense. Your biggest asset to a large degree is your people, those people that deliver the services and support that you provide. So to not include funding to enable them to do the very best job, given that many of them have had a really, really challenging time over the last couple of years, is a bit mad. So reassuring funders by saying, we're well run, we support our people to deliver excellent work, that's why your funding is going to go to a good place. So yes, those are probably just a few thoughts, of which I've got many, many more, but Leila, thank you very much for all of that thought and insight.
I'm just going to allude on a couple of things I've picked up, and there's so many chats there, but someone mentioned solicited and unsolicited applications. If they say we do not take unsolicited, it just means that they either decide who they're going to select, or you need to go to your trustees or people with a list of these kind of trusts and foundations and corporates, and see if they know anybody in those, and if they're able to write a letter of recommendation for you. So that is a possibility. And someone else mentioned that people don't support organisations that have already started their projects, but we need to do all the costings beforehand. We don't know how much it costs. I totally agree with that, and that's really, really hard. There's two ways around that. One is that you can just go for core funding and use some of your core funding towards that. Or another is that you can actually apply for organisations that give towards feasibility and research as well. And that could be part of it, that you get some money in to do that kind of feasibility, looking at the scale of things first, before you actually go ahead and take it to the next level. So there are ways around it. I'm just trying. It's quite difficult. I'm finding this Q&A box very strange because things aren't coming in order for me. So it's difficult to know who's actually asked the most recent question. I can't. But I'm just trying to answer as much as I can here. Chris,
if you want Moon for Good, which our program, which hopefully I've answered a few, and I'll keep looking and answer a few more. And I think it links into maybe a point that we've made here about funders being open and clear you know, what they are looking for. Hopefully we can be clear about what we're looking for, which is small donations for absolutely anyone and everyone. There's a question there about being successful. So £1,000 donations we give are for anyone. You can win multiple times. They're not connected to the larger grants. The larger grants are more the ones we're kind of focused on finding. It is a little bit influenced by volume, so it's a big draw. Everyone goes in a pot. So if you do encourage more nominations from your supporters, then you will have a slightly better chance of being drawn. But then I would say that we've had charities that have had one nomination that have won. So it's quite a fair process, and we're reaching more and more new charities every single time.
Can I just say thank you? I'm going to take a photo of that, Lucinda, if you don't mind. Lucinda said, it's a great webinar. We've held our attention. That's really good to know. I've actually lost that. But honestly, I think if you've got any other questions that you feel hasn't been answered, if you want to, there's one here, funding applications details, hugely time consuming for small charities who often have to approach multiple funders at the same time to cover a mixture of core and project. Does Benefact Trust actively research and approach organisations that they feel fit their criteria? That's for you, Chris, really.
Yeah, and the answer to that is yes. Yeah, and that's a balance of that distributed with as many different causes as possible, with our heart and then with our head, thinking about which organisations are really supporting the causes that are close to customers and communities. The best example of that is something there was a comment about, actually, which is kind of heritage organisations. You know, we protect more listed buildings than anyone else. So we have the largest vested interest in historic buildings in this country. So it's in our interest to make sure they're preserved and protected for the future. That means having the right skills, heritage, craft skills to repair and restore them. So we've got partnerships with a couple of organisations which we've actively sought out because we've seen that they're doing some great work in that space. That's not to say that there aren't other organisations out there doing great work also that might kind of creep onto that scene and be the partners that we would want to work with in the future. So we are looking, but we're always interested to hear as well, as long as it's really aligned to those areas of impact.
Okay, if anybody's got any burning questions that's not been answered, Chris, are they okay to email you and then you can pass it on to me?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then I can then answer the questions and copy, and then I'll copy Chris in and you will get the slides. But I hope that was helpful. It's really difficult to kind of spot everybody's questions in the Q&A. So that's good. Thank you for the nice feedback. Just trying to think. We've answered that question. Can you apply for funding projects that have already taken place? Not necessarily, though. Some are specific. Some will say you can do, but they will tell you, but generally not. But sometimes the pot of money that's left that maybe, for example, local authority might need to give away, and they'll say, look, we will happily give it away to projects that have already happened. So you've got to look at the criteria. Okay. And Chris is going to type his email in. And yeah, so I think that's, so thank you for the, oh yeah, feedback. Ask for feedback. Some will say to you, we're very busy, we don't give feedback. Others, email them or call them. And by all means, some are quite open for you to call them in advance anyway, before you waste your time. But think about what you want to ask them. And really show that you've done your research. But if you just want to double check about something, just then by all means call them. Okay. So that's, yeah. So I think, Chris, are we good?
Yeah, I'll see if I can spot any more comments, and I'll answer as many of those as I can.
Are we able to save this Q&A so that I can have a look at it afterwards and see if I can decipher some more questions to answer? I don't know.
Yes, we can.
Can we do? That's great, Valerina. If you can do that, then I can have a look at it and come back to some of those questions, and I'll email it to you, both you and Chris, and then it can be forwarded to the attendees. Okay, brilliant. That's great. Well, shall we? Yeah. Well, thank you very much, everybody, for attending. I'm not sure, Valerina, how to press stop record. Things coming up here for me to do that.
Thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you very much, everybody.
You're released.
You're released, yes.